Baiji laid the groundwork, but Squid Game adapted those themes for a modern global audience, and the result was deeply disturbing. Squid Game symbols meaning. Throughout the series, we see that the Squid Game is maintained and controlled by the pink soldiers who have some kind of hierarchy within their ranks, defined by the symbols on their masks. All of this reflects a class structure, the type deeply embedded in Korean and global society. At the bottom of the hierarchy are workers with circle. These workers perform tasks such as cleaning up after games, setting up events, serving food, and disposing of bodies. They have the least authority and are only allowed to speak when addressed by higher-ranking staff. Essentially, they are the typical low-class human being trying to survive and do their job. They're expendable. The middle tier consists of workers wearing triangle masks. These workers act as armed soldiers, enforcing rules and maintaining order of the games. They're the ones responsible for eliminating contestants who lose games and handling crowd control. While they have authority over circle workers and contestants, they still answer to higher-ranking staff. They're the lower middle class getting by with their jobs. At the top of the worker hierarchy are those wearing square masks. These managers oversee both triangle and circle workers and have direct communication with the front man. They have access to the surveillance room and are responsible for announcing prize money to contestants. They're upper middle class, enjoying the status but continuing to work. But of course, the hierarchy extends beyond the workers, with the front man wearing a unique geometric mask and overseeing the entire operation. VIPs who observe the games wear elaborate gold animal-shaped masks. With their unique, elegantly crafted masks, they reflect the upper class with the luxury of nothing. This whole hierarchical system not only organizes the workers, it also reflects the core themes of the show. It's a corrupt, unfair system which rewards those at the top who contribute nothing to the system as a whole. Not only does it reflect the way the world works, it makes it feel completely inevitable and hopeless. Level 2. The frontman sabotaged their team. In the 5th episode of Squid Game 2, the frontman, disguised as player 001, joins Gi-hun and the team for the six-legged pentathlon. But if you go back and watch the scene closely, you can see that when it comes to his turn to play the game, the frontman is actively sabotaging his own team. Back in Season 1, it was pretty clearly established throughout that the frontman is left-handed, most notably in the scene where he shoots his brother Junho. But when it finally comes time for him to complete the spinning top portion of the six-legged pentathlon, he deliberately uses his right non-dominant hand and fails repeatedly. Every single time, the frontman struggles with the spinning top challenge, but when he throws with his left hand, he gets it on the first try. Yet, he makes multiple failed attempts, throwing the top in various directions and forcing the team to waste precious time retrieving it. This strategy eats up most of the remaining time allotted for the challenge. Nobody seems to notice. Of course, there's no idea of who he truly is, but his actions put so much pressure on the team that they only managed to cross the finish line with seconds to spare. We don't really know exactly why he does this. We know that in all likelihood, if they lost, the frontman would not be killed, so he has no fear of the games. But it doesn't make sense for the frontman to be trying to kill his team. His whole motive to be in the games is to psychologically break Gi-hun and show him that humanity is doomed. So if the team dies, the frontman doesn't get the satisfaction of proving he was right. We don't know why the frontman sabotages the team, but it's pretty undeniable that he wants them to sweat as death comes dangerously close. Ali's fingers. Back in Squid Game 1, beloved character Ali Abdul is missing a few fingers from a workplace accident, but this is a lot more than just a unique character trait. Ali's missing fingers are actually a pretty powerful symbol of not only his backstory, but the harsh realities of exploitation and inequality faced by migrant workers all over South Korea. Ali is a Pakistani immigrant, a kind-hearted and noble man who finds himself participating in the deadly games due to financial desperation. It's established that Ali lost his fingers due to a factory accident, highlighting the dangerous working conditions and lack of safety measures that foreign laborers face. Many of these workers are not given the kind of treatment or respect that natives get, just like Ali. But these missing fingers also reflect his vulnerability and goodness. In a society and a game that values physical strength and dexterity, Ali's injury marks him as an outsider and potentially less capable, despite his really impressive strength and determination. Throughout the series, that trusting nature is exploited by others, including Sun Woo, who ultimately betrays him in the devastating Marvel game. Ali's fingers are a symbol of racism and discrimination in South Korea and all over the world toward immigrant workers, who are lured in and taken advantage of by the very people they trust, only to lose their humanity. Squid Game doll in real life. Of all the games and characters in Squid Game, the 10-foot-tall animatronic figure named Young Hee is by far the most iconic and recognizable. But in the Philippines, she's no longer restricted to marketing or the show itself. She's a physical presence designed to scare the citizens straight. The Philippine officials decided to install a replica of the Squid Game doll outside the Robinsons Galleria Mall in Quezon City, Manila. The area is pretty notorious for accidents and danger thanks to tourists and locals jaywalking on a regular basis. That's where Young Hee comes in. She's positioned near a crosswalk programmed to monitor pedestrian behavior. Whenever the traffic light is red, the doll's eyes light up, and her head turns to face any jaywalkers. Those who have seen the show know not to take the risk. The consequences could be serious. For those who haven't, well, it doesn't really end all that well for them. But instead of being killed, they get arrested or fined. The figure has become so popular that visitors come from all over just to recreate the red light, green light, take some selfies with the doll, and see if they can survive crossing the road. One player is a VIP. The concept of Squid Game sees a lot of financially strapped people playing the game to pay off their debts, but not all of the players are equal. In both Season 1 and Season 2, we've seen people at the highest internal echelons of the game taking part for their own personal motives. And now, one theory suggests that a player within Season 2 is not a player at all, but a VIP. Player 100, In Jong-dae, is without a doubt one of the most hated characters from Season 2. His arrogance, obsession with money, and his short temper have made him extremely easy to hate. All of these traits were also seen in Season 1 with the VIPs. In fact, throughout the competition, In Jong-dae has consistently pushed for the games to continue, even though he knows and has seen the dangers that are lurking around the corner. That's a mindset that the VIPs also hold. The games have to go on, or there's no fun to be had. But some people believe that his willingness to play on and his reckless confidence might suggest that he has some inside knowledge of the games, or even some form of protection from those in charge, not unlike the Trump. Obviously, many people would discount the theory instantly due to the fact that the VIPs were clearly American, and Player 100 is not. But just look at his debt. Player 100 owes 10 billion won. That's about $7 million, an amount way more than the debts of any other contestant. That massive amount of money suggests a lifestyle and financial quality of life more in line with the wealthy VIPs than an ordinary participant. The theory suggests that he could have lost a substantial amount of money betting on the previous games, forcing him to enter the competition to recover his losses. After all, we know that the VIPs simply enjoy seeing humans suffer, so it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to assume that they would feel the same about their fellow VIPs. However, they agree with me that the best way to minimize our own suffering is to hit that subscribe button. Thanks. Foreshadowing on the walls. Squid Game's visuals are by far one of the most popular and celebrated aspects of the entire show, but there's a hidden detail that many people missed the first time around. Hidden in the background of the show scenes foreshadowed. At first, the drawings on the wall of the dormitory are impossible to make out due to the crowded bunk beds, but as players are eliminated and beds are removed, the murals become more visible. In Season 1, we see the stick-figure cartoons depicting all 6 games the contestants will face: Red Light, Green Light, Dalgona, Tug of War, Marbles, the Glass Stepping Stones, and the Squid Game. They were there from the very beginning. We just didn't notice until the end of the show. But Season 2 continues this trend. We've already seen the first 3 games: Red Light, Green Light, the Six-Legged Pentathlon, and Mingle. The drawings suggest some more to come. 2 have been identified, one depicting players hanging from the ceiling suggesting a monkey bars challenge, and another with a checkered path. That seems to suggest a human chess game, which would be totally in line with themes of the show. After all, Squid Game is just one giant chessboard. By the time you realize that these drawings have been there the whole time, it makes the themes of the show more unnerving. Each of these people have been predetermined from the start. They and we just didn't know. Level 3. Gi-hun as the new frontman. With just one more season before the Squid Game story comes to an end, the internet is trying to predict where the story will lead. But the most popular theory of all is also the darkest. Jung Gi-hun, the show's protagonist, will become the new frontman by the end of Season 3. And we know that Gi-hun is a good guy, someone who believes wholeheartedly in humanity. At the beginning of Season 2, Gi-hun is driven by a desire to stop the games entirely and save everybody before any blood can be spilled. But when he fails, and when all of his other attempts fail, Gi-hun resorts to increasingly morally ambiguous decisions. He makes a conscious choice to stage a violent uprising, winning, sacrificing some lives to potentially save many others. It's what the frontman wants. Throughout the season, he's been trying to convince Gi-hun that humanity is doomed, inherently selfish and cynical, and that the games serve a purpose in the world. And Hwang Dong-hyuk has often compared the frontman to Darth Vader, a comment that seems to suggest there will be some twist in Season 3 with the frontman redeeming himself somehow. But for now, it's pretty obvious that frontman wants to break Gi-hun's spirit. If he does, Gi-hun may well take his place as the next frontman. The recruiters face manipulation. The first episode of Squid Game 2 introduced the recruiter played by Jung Yu. But one scene at the end of the episode shows just how incredibly powerful his performance is, showing off his duality with just one shot and 2 expressions at once. The writing coupled with Jung Yoon's expression shows off both confidence and fear playing out simultaneously across his face. One half shows the confidence of a man who has climbed the ranks of the Squid Game organization, while the other half betrays the fear of a person confronting their own mortality. This is actually his entire performance in just one single expression. Throughout Episode 1, the recruiter never once wavers in his confidence. He's extremely assured in outmaneuvering the loan sharks, forcing them to play a twisted version of rock, paper, scissors with sheer glee. And when he comes to play Russian roulette with Gi-hun, he never for a second doubts his choices. But under it all, he's driven by something strange. His obsessive behavior, buying bread and lottery tickets to torment homeless people in the park, and aggressive resentment of the poor suggests some kind of fear within him. He's so scared of losing control that he only does it in front of the people with absolutely no power or status. That's even more clear when he reveals that he killed his own father during the game, proving that he takes out his rage only on those who mean nothing to him, and is probably terrified of doing anything else. Alternate ending. The ending of Squid Game 1 proved to be more controversial than anybody could have expected. Gi-hun's decision not to get on the plane led to huge amounts of online discourse about his character, moral compass, and parenting. But what would have happened if he did get on the plane? In this alternate ending, Gi-hun would have boarded the plane to Los Angeles, choosing to reunite with his daughter and start a whole new life. There's no denying that it would have been a more definitive and optimistic conclusion to Gi-hun's story, offering him a chance at a fresh start away from the trauma of the game. But would it really? Gi-hun would have been willing to rebuild a relationship with his family, specifically his daughter, after repeatedly letting her down. And it would have been him agreeing to the frontman's suggestion that boarding the plane was for his own good, potentially allowing him to escape their influence. But he still would have been tracked by the frontman, and he still would have been traumatized by the whole experience. Ultimately, none of it would have aligned with the show's themes, and it would be a total betrayal of Gi-hun's character development. Throughout the series, Gi-hun is portrayed as someone with strong principles and a sense of justice. He believes in humanity to the point that he wants to save them. By choosing to leave on the plane, he would have turned his back on the ongoing exploitation of desperate individuals by the game organizers. He'd be as complicit in their suffering as anyone else. 14 players that did not return. In episode 2 of Squid Game 1, a group of the players returned to the game after voting to leave following the initial round of red light, green light. But 14 players chose not to come back at all. That's when the frontman orders a manager to keep an eye on them. And while the show doesn't actually reveal what happens to these people, it strongly implies that their fate is not as simple as returning to their normal lives. Because in reality, they never really leave the game at all. In the first episode of Season 2, Gi-hun realizes that the frontman is using a GPS tracker implanted in his skull. Of course, we know that this is not limited to Gi-hun. In Season 1, we see that when players are initially recruited, they're sedated and transported to the game location in secret, where their necks are scanned with the GPS already implanted. Which means that the organization behind the games cannot simply allow former participants to walk away without ensuring their silence. Those 14 players will be tracked just like Gi-hun, who was the winner. It's entirely possible that they were coerced into silence through threats or blackmail. Some might have been eliminated to ensure they couldn't reveal the game's existence. They could be under constant surveillance with a threat of harm to themselves or their loved ones if they speak out. Or they may well have rejoined the games later and died. The whole point of the episode is to illustrate another key disturbing theme of the show, the illusion of choice. While the players are given the option to leave, the consequences of that choice remain unclear. In fact, they may be worse than choosing to stay. Controversial marketing. Netflix marketing of Squid Game 2 was extensive and international. Young-hee turned up in basically every major city, but nobody took offense to it quite as much as Sydney, Australia. The doll had been erected at one of Sydney's most scenic and family-friendly locations, which turned out to be the most controversial thing they could have done. But while most people loved the terrifying sight of Young-hee out in the wild, families bringing their youths to this family-friendly location were horrified that Netflix would choose to promote such a violent adult